Hi guys, tonight we're going somewhere different. Not forward, not backward, but deeper. Into a place where time slows down and stories start breathing again. The truth? You would not last a single day in the ancient city of Sodom. Forget what you've seen in movies or painted in dusty old books. This wasn't a place of quiet evenings and golden sunsets. It was loud, alive, glowing with pleasure and danger, a city that worshipped desire, not mercy. You'd wake up to music that never stopped and laughter that hid a hunger no feast could fill. You'd walk streets that shimmered with gold by day and burned with secrets by night. Every smile would cost you something. Every shadow would whisper a deal. And beneath it all, a silence. The kind of silence that waits for fire. So before you get comfortable, do one thing for me. Dim the lights, breathe slow, and tell me in the comments where you are tonight, what city, what time it is, what the air feels like where you are. Because somewhere, across oceans and screens, you and I are about to stand in the same story, one that began thousands of years ago and still hasn't ended. You wake to heat before you wake to light. It presses against your chest like a hand, warm and insistent, carrying the breath of spices and smoke. The walls around you are stone and fabric-layered mats. Hanging curtains dyed the colour of ripe figs. A single window slit where the city already murmurs like a hive. Somewhere below, a vendor drags open a wooden stall. Somewhere above, someone laughs at nothing, laughs simply because the morning is new and the wine from last night is not yet finished with them. Your mat is rough beneath your shoulder blades. It keeps the body honest. You sit up slowly, and the room answers with the small music of clay, a jar tapping a bowl, a fig plate nudged by your foot, seed shells rolling away into a shadow you haven't swept in days. The air smells like oil and bread, like sandalwood rubbed on wrists, like old smoke from a brazier that is always just about to go out and always just about to flare again. You lift the curtain and Sodom blinks in the whole of it. Sunrise melted into copper roofs, alleys threaded with early runners, a cat like a strip of night flicking along a ledge. The city wakes the way a performer wakes, not slowly, not shyly, but with a stretch of every muscle at once. You could almost say the streets yawn. You could almost swear the stones themselves tilt toward the sun to drink. It would be easy here, you think, to mistake motion for meaning. Outside, the first arguments of the day have already begun, and not the kind that come with anger. No, these are the deals that dance, hands cutting the air, voices rising and falling like tambourines. A price is not a number here. It is a story. Two men lean over a roll of dyed linen so blue it looks like a square of evening. One swears he has a cousin in Gomorrah who would pay triple. The other swears the cousin does not exist, but offers sweet dates to soften the disbelief. You watch their faces and you realize they are not talking to each other as much as performing each other. Mirroring smiles, borrowing shrugs. The city is the audience and the judge. You are thirsty, but not for water. You are thirsty for edges, the cool cut of a shadowed doorway, the thin knife of wind that sometimes slips between buildings if you stand just right. You descend the steps to the street, sandals catching grainy dust. The first bucket of the morning tips over a threshold, and a ribbon of water runs down the alley, collecting seeds and laughter, and a shard of someone's night. Sodom in morning is not a quiet thing. It does not tiptoe. It does not ask permission. It opens like a hand. Figs hit the boards with a soft bruised sound. Oil glows in shallow bowls like a tame sun. A flute tries a shy melody in the corner and then decides against shyness entirely. A boy with a chalk-white smile juggles pomegranates until one bursts and the crowd applauds the red splash, as if blood were a kind of fireworks. There is no shortage here. That is the first truth that presses its thumbprint into your thoughts. There is grain and fruit. There is cloth and perfume. There is meat turning on spits, garlic whispering itself into the air. A platter passes you, flatbread painted with sesame, olives black as midnight, and the smell is kind, and the hand that carries it is kind too for a moment. For a moment you think, perhaps the rumours are wrong. Perhaps people have simply confused hunger with holiness. Perhaps a full table looks like sin to a starving eye. But Sodom is not simply full. Sodom is full of being full. You learn the city's appetite by listening to how it speaks of time. No one here says tomorrow. They say when the lamps are lit or when the jug is empty, and they mean it. A plan lasts as long as a flame. A promise lasts as long as a song. You hear it in the cadence of their greetings. Not, how are you? But, what did you taste? Not, how did you sleep? But, whom did you see? The tongue becomes a tray. The eye becomes a cup. Turn right, and you have the spice quarter. It is narrow as a story whispered under breath and twice as dangerous. Piled cones of coriander and cumin rise like miniature hills that remember rain. A woman in lemon yellow pushes past with a basket of laurel, and the trail she leaves is a map of every kitchen in the city. Men weigh saffron threads like they are counting hairs from the sun's head. Above, strips of cloth flutter, pretending to be clouds. Below, a child crushes a cardamom pod under heel, and the scent leaps up like a startled bird. If you could learn a place by its fragrances alone, you would say Sodom is a land of celebration. If you could learn a place by its silences, you would say you don't know it yet. Turn left and you find the square that changes names with the hour. In the morning, it is the measure, because scales glint there and weights fall with quiet authority. At midday, it is the mouth, because everything ends up inside it: talk and food and plans and boasts. Toward evening they call it the mirror, because lamps tilt and faces multiply, and you're never sure if you're looking at yourself or someone wearing your thirst. You watch a man thread coins through his fingers and think of prayer beads. You watch a woman test a veil against her profile reflected in a copper tray and think of moonlight trying on the shape of a cloud. You watch two adolescents stand too close and then stand even closer and then laugh, because if you laugh at your pulse, no one can accuse you of having one. A parade wanders into the square with the accidental grace of a dream three boys on a painted cart, one of them banging a drum that has been reskinned so often it remembers 10 different songs. Behind them, a troupe of acrobats tosses themselves into the sky. The sky, polite host that it is, hands them back. A man with a voice like seashells sells charms for luck, charms for love, charms for the illusion of both. He speaks to the air in the tone of someone who knows it owes him an answer. It is impossible, you tell yourself, to be bored here. That is true. It is equally impossible, you begin to suspect, to be satisfied. You try the bread. It is warm and pleasant, and the sesame crunches in a way that feels like applause in your mouth. You try the olives. They are bitter in the first second, and then rich in the third, and then nothing in the fifth. You try the honeyed dates, and they insist. The tongue is honest. It can be bribed for only so long. You feel the sugar bloom and then collapse. You reach for water, and it is sweet, and then not sweet, and then who cares? You greet a friend, and he is a stranger, and then your brother, and then a stranger again, and under his words you hear the soft scrape of a need that does not confess its name. Sodom wears beauty like a festival cloak, but even the best cloth can conceal and cannot cure. When the laughter swells, something under it knocks a soft, steady tapping, like a moth at a door, like a conscience at a party. You can ignore it for hours. You can outsing it until your voice is smoke. But at the edge of every feast there is a chair pulled slightly away from the table, as if for someone who never sits. Toward midday, the heat climbs a ladder you cannot see and announces itself from the highest rung. The city slows but does not sleep. It lounges. A fountain in a courtyarded house paints silver circles on the air. Slaves, no, not that word. Not for this place that refuses to write itself clearly. Servants, workers, hands you do not know. By name pour more water into the basin, and the basin remembers sky. You rest your elbows on a wall and listen to a man tell another man that the trick to winning is to wager what you're willing to lose. The second man laughs. The laugh is shiny. He will learn eventually that the only thing worth gambling in a city like this is attention. There are rules here, but only the fools write them down. The wise memorize them, then pretend to forget. Do not show your hunger. It will be purchased and fed to you at twice its price. Do not show your kindness. It will be harnessed and set to work until it coughs. Do not show your wonder. Wonder is a currency, and the dealers corner it first. Above all, do not show your fear. Fear tastes like ripe fruit to the mouth that loves to bite, and yet fear moves under the stone like water. You see it in how quickly doors close when footsteps echo too loud. You see it in how the watchman's spears flash like arguments no one wants to lose. You see it in how the old sit with their tongues pressed behind their teeth, as if words might escape and betray them. You see it in how the young practice shamelessness like a trade, because shame is expensive and laborious, and who has time for that when the sun is busy gilding everything? By late afternoon, Sodom changes its costume. The sun leans west, and the city learns the trick of looking innocent by looking golden. Children, sticky with fruit, chase each other between shadows that lengthen like unasked questions. Musicians tune strings to a pitch that tastes of oranges. A man at a balcony spills a bowl of rose petals that land on a cart below like a blessing or a dare. Lamps are tested and trimmed. Oil checks the mirror of its own surface and pronounces itself beautiful. You think of leaving the square. You think of finding a quiet street where someone is old enough to be tired of spectacle and young enough to remember the precise angle of the evening star. You take 2 steps, and Sodom turns its head to you. It is not a threatening gesture. It is worse. It is affectionate. It knows your name already. It knows the exact size of your thirst. It knows which promises to whisper in your ear to keep you from the door. At the edge of the city, the gate casts a long shadow, and in that shadow you glimpse a different posture, a man standing as if he is waiting for something that is not for sale. He is not dressed like the market. He is dressed like the morning. Simple, enough, undecorated. The way he watches the road makes you uneasy. The way he nods at passing strangers makes you calmer than you'd prefer. You cannot name him yet. The city hasn't decided whether to accept him as a character in its story. But you see, he belongs to a different story that does not ask the city's permission to be told. "Where are you from?" someone asks you in a voice large with wine. "And what did you bring us?" That is Sodom's favourite question disguised as courtesy. The city will welcome any traveller as long as the traveller arrives with something to spend coin or rumour or heat or sorrow. If you offer nothing but your breath, the city will take that too and sell it back to you as music. Evening draws its first line across the sky, thin as a vein. The lamps are lit and the streets become a hallway in a palace that never ends. Music starts in 3 different corners and finds each other in the centre, as if the notes had planned a meeting. You could walk all night and never reach a place that says enough. You could close your eyes, and the city would paint new eyes on your lids so you wouldn't miss the show. Beyond the laughter, there is a door. You have not seen it, and yet you know it. Beyond the door, there is a house where curtains are not hung to tease but to guard. Beyond the house, there is a table set not with abundance but with attention. A man stands at that table, and every choice he makes costs him something. He is not absent from the city. He is a thorn in its palm. He takes into his house what the streets treat like a rumour. He steps into the alley when the alley becomes a mouth. You have heard of men like him, and you have learned to be suspicious of your admiration. Sodom teaches you that virtue might be another kind of performance, another mask worn only because it fits the role someone gives you. But there is something in the way this one watches the horizon that convinces you he is not auditioning. He is waiting. Night is a new market. The lamp sells shadow, and the shadow buys faces. The same spice that smelled like triumph at noon now smells like a dare. Flutes flirt with drums, and the drums pretend to be thunder. And if you know anything about storms, you know not to be fooled by the first warning. A procession of masked dancers pours down the main street, and nobody asks what the masks mean. Everybody knows what they are for. Meaning is not difficult in Sodom. Responsibility is. You admire how cleanly the city separates the two. It is a skill. It is an illness. You step aside as a litter glides past, curtains drawn, laughter stitched into its seams. The carriers are strong and precise, their feet choosing stones the way a scholar chooses words. Behind them comes a small band of boys with flares on rods, the flames bending like knees in prayer. You think, we kneel to something even when we swear we kneel to nothing. The city nods as if it has heard that thought before and found a way to charge admission. A man bumps your shoulder and smiles an apology bright as a blade. His friend whispers a rumour loud enough to be overheard. Two strangers entered the gate at dusk, and an old man, not old exactly, but seasoned, took them into his home. Hospitality is currency too, and the city's bankers never sleep. What is rare is valuable. What is valuable is hunted. You do not understand yet why your heart lifts and then falls when you hear it. You do not understand yet that mercy in Sodom is not simply kindness, it is defiance. The night deepens, and along with it, so does the city's conviction that nothing exists outside its walls. Sky becomes ceiling. Stars become lamps hung by a generous but predictable host. You stand in the street, and you feel the vibration of many feet travelling to the same rumour. The laughter shifts. It acquires an edge, the way a river acquires a knife when the bank narrows. And in the echo between one drumbeat and the next, you hear a small sound that does not belong to the city. It might be a footstep. It might be a wing against a window. It might be the breath a man takes before he knocks. Sodom does not like to be interrupted. Sodom calls interruption blasphemy unless it can charge admission for it. But there is a line between spectacle and visitation, and tonight, without realizing it, you have wandered to its edge. A wind walks down the alley, indifferent to perfume. The lamps flare and bow, as if acknowledging a guest they were not prepared to meet. Somewhere, a door closes, not with a slam, but with a decision. Somewhere else, a voice that has not yet spoken in this story draws its first breath. You feel it before you name it, the way animals tense in the beat of air that precedes lightning. The city keeps talking because talking is what it knows how to do when it cannot explain what it hears. Music climbs another rung. Jokes multiply. Offers sweeten and sour in the space of a nod. The rumour that began in a whisper grows legs and teeth. You follow it without meaning to, as if it has looped a string around your waist. And still, for one last moment, Sodom is beautiful. The streets are streams of amber. The faces are coins. The laughter is a lantern swinging in a breeze so gentle you could almost mistake it for a promise. Someone sings from a balcony, and the song is about a river that never runs dry. Someone else answers from a window with a song about fire that never burns. You stand perfectly still and learn something you wish you didn't. A city can be both a feast and a famine at the same time. It can give you everything and then nothing, and then ask you to thank it for both. When the first shout tears the ribbon of night, the city grins, of course there is entertainment, and gathers at its own mouth to eat its own echo. You move with them because that is what feet do when the ground itself leans. It is only after you turn the corner and see the house, the simple door, the narrow courtyard, the lamps set for welcome, not for show, that you realize you have stepped out of a performance and into a scene. The air tastes different here. Less honey, more truth. You do not know yet what that truth will demand. You only know that it will not be sold, and it will not be silent. At your back, the city continues to hum and glitter as if nothing has changed. Before you, a shadow passes across the threshold, 2 shadows, perhaps 3, and you understand that not all arrivals are announced by music. Some come in on dust and decision. The drum beats again. The laughter tries to follow it and trips. Somewhere a mask slips, somewhere a face appears, somewhere a hand knocks and the knock is answered, and as the laughter of the city thins into a single distant thread, the sky seems to tremble, not with heat now, but with attention, leaning down to hear what this small house will say to the night. The same sky hangs over you as the street widens into the market that never sleeps. The crowd flows round your ankles like water, and you step forward without realizing you've crossed a border. The same sky hangs above you as the street widens into the market that never sleeps. The crowd flows around your ankles like water, pulling you forward whether you choose to move or not. The lamps have multiplied, and each one burns as if it competes with the stars. The smell of roasted meat and crushed fruit is heavy enough to touch. Every colour here is louder than sound. Scarlet robes, gold dust, black hair lacquered in oil and sweat. The market doesn't rest. It only changes rhythm, like a heartbeat that refuses to stop. You pass rows of vendors who no longer sell food or fabric, but something harder to name. One woman holds a jar of crushed myrrh and smiles at anyone who meets her eyes. She says nothing. She doesn't need to. The scent speaks first, whispering promises the tongue can't make. Another man sings as he sells tiny bottles filled with coloured smoke. Dreams, he calls them, captured from the mouth of dawn. You know it's a lie, but the crowd doesn't care. In Sodom, the lie only has to be beautiful. The cobblestones sweat under hundreds of feet. Drums roll from the square. Not war drums, not quite music either. Something between celebration and hunger. The rhythm grips the air and everything sways. You feel it in your ribs before you hear it in your ears. You pass through an arch carved with lions that have forgotten how to roar. Inside, the market grows wilder. Tables disappear, cushions replace them. Smoke curls from clay pipes shaped like open hands. People lie close, faces shining in the light that flatters and forgives. Every gesture is slow, deliberate, a wordless conversation between pride and desire. You realize something strange. No one here is alone, yet everyone is lonely. Their laughter overlaps like waves, covering what should not be heard. The deeper you walk, the more the air feels thick, alive, full of breath that doesn't belong to prayer. Someone brushes your arm. A voice says, "Stay until sunrise." You don't answer, but the voice follows. In Sodom, the night itself is a god. Worship while you can. You keep walking. The voice fades, but its shadow doesn't. You try to look for something simple, a loaf of bread, a cup of wine, something that means only what it is. But even the bread is shaped like hearts, the wine poured like a performance. Even thirst has become entertainment. The drums grow faster, bells join them, the market becomes a stage, dancers emerge from the smoke, men and women dressed in mirrors, bodies painted with gold leaf that cracks when they move. They twirl and bow, their laughter cutting through the music like glass. The crowd cheers not for beauty, but for permission. The dancers are not selling art, They're selling the right to forget shame. And shame, you realize, is the only thing that has truly gone extinct here. There is no boundary between audience and performer now. A nobleman with rings on every finger steps into the circle, tears a mask from one dancer's face, and places it on his own. The crowd roars. He bows, but the bow isn't gratitude, it's conquest. He leaves the mask on, dancing like someone who believes anonymity is innocence. Behind him, the dancers laugh, but it isn't joy, it's relief. In this city, laughter means survival. The air trembles with heat and perfume. You hear fragments of songs about gods who demand no obedience and lovers who demand no names. Somewhere, a priest of some forgotten idol shouts over the crowd, "Everything sacred is in your hands. Everything forbidden is yours to touch." The people applaud. No one notices how his eyes look empty even as his mouth smiles. You step aside as a group passes by. 4 men carrying a couch draped in silk. On it lies a woman with hair so black it steals the light. She is eating grapes one by one, not because she's hungry, but because the crowd watches her do it. Her eyes sweep over faces like fingers testing the ripeness of fruit. When they meet yours, she doesn't blink. She says, "Are you enjoying the show, stranger?" You don't reply. She smiles, not kindly. Then you're already part of it. Someone nearby starts playing a stringed instrument that sounds like laughter if laughter could bleed. The rhythm returns, heavy, hypnotic. Around you, people move closer together, as if the market itself is inhaling. And then, beneath the music, a faint sound rises. Weeping. You look around. It comes from a boy sitting alone behind a broken stall, head bowed, hands covering his face. No one sees him, or maybe they all see him and pretend not to. The boy is not performing. That's why he's invisible. You kneel. "What's wrong?" you ask, but your voice feels strange here, too soft, too clean. He shakes his head. "They said I should smile." His words tremble, swallowed by the drum beats. You want to say something, anything, but the crowd's noise eats your voice. When you stand, the air itself feels heavier. The boy is gone. Maybe he was never there. You realize you're starting to forget what silence sounds like. From a balcony, petals fall like slow red rain. Each one lands without sound. The smell is sweet, almost holy, but beneath it, something rotting. That's how sin works here. It never hides. It decorates. The street bends and you see the river. At night, it glows faintly from the lamps reflecting in its surface. Couples walk along the edge, whispering names that will be discarded by morning. Some argue, some laugh too loudly, some simply stare at their own reflections. You see a man kiss the hand of another man and laugh as though daring heaven to speak. You see a woman drape her arm around a stranger's neck, her eyes fixed not on him, but on her own shadow in the water. Every act here is both pride and prayer, but the prayer is to the self. A group passes carrying torches shaped like vines. Their laughter trails behind like smoke. One of them says, "The gods are merciful. They let us be our own." Another replies, "Then mercy must be blind." They laugh again. The torches hiss. You remember something from a story you once heard, about a place that called evil freedom and mistook silence for peace. You never thought you'd see it alive. Now you realize you're standing in it. The river smells like wine and ashes. You touch it, it's warm. The water shouldn't be warm at night. You look up. Clouds are gathering. Lightning flickers, not across the sky, but deep within it, like something waking. The drums continue. The music refuses to end. A man climbs a statue and begins to shout poetry to the crowd. There is no judgment here. The gods are asleep. Let fire be our witness. The people cheer, throwing petals, coins, ribbons. You can't tell whether they celebrate courage or madness. Maybe they don't know the difference anymore. As the night stretches, time itself begins to wobble. You can't tell if minutes or hours pass. The same faces appear again and again, slightly rearranged, as if the city is dreaming and you're stuck inside its repetition. A storm gathers somewhere you can't see. The first drop of rain touches your wrist. Warm, not cool. The crowd barely notices. Someone laughs. The heavens envy us. Even the clouds want to join our feast. But you notice something else. The rain leaves marks on the skin that don't fade. Tiny, dark, like burns. You step back under an awning. The smell of iron fills the air. Not perfume this time, but something raw, something ancient. The laughter stumbles. People look up. The music falters. And for a heartbeat, Sodom blinks. Just once, like a creature realizing it's being watched. You hear a whisper behind you. They came tonight. 2 of them. Guests in the house near the gate. Another voice answers. Then the night will be long. The drums stop. The crowd hushes, not out of fear but curiosity. A ripple moves through the market. Not wind, not sound. An awareness, spreading. Even the torches lean as if listening. You turn toward the gate. In the distance, through the thin rain and the glow of too many lamps, you see a house with its door closed. No laughter, no music. Just a single light in the window. Steady and still. You don't know why, but your chest tightens. Maybe it's the silence calling to you. Maybe it's mercy, quietly arriving where it's least wanted. Behind you, the market starts to roar again, louder than before, because that's what Sodom does when it feels the sky change. It shouts to drown out the sound of its own ending. You walk toward the gate through the noise and the smoke and the perfume. The path narrows, the lamps dim. You hear voices at the edges of the street, harsh, demanding, curious. And as you reach the edge of the city, the sound shifts, from laughter to knocking. The same sky leans closer now, heavy and waiting. You realize you've crossed a threshold, and every breath you take from here belongs to a different story. The street ends where the noise does. The lamps behind you flicker and die one by one, like the heartbeat of a tired animal finally giving up. You walk slower now. The air feels heavy, thick with something unnamed. Something watching. The laughter from the market fades into memory, replaced by the small, fragile sounds that cities make when no one is performing anymore. Wind dragging across clay, a shutter creaking. A single door, breathing light. You stop there. The door belongs to a modest house set apart from the rest. Its walls are clean but cracked, honest in their wear. The glow inside is steady, unlike the trembling torches of the streets. This house does not sell anything. It only shelters. A man stands in the doorway. He looks older than the city around him, though not by years, by weight. His shoulders bend as if carrying something invisible, something that has been following him for years and refuses to let go. He holds a small clay lamp, the flame barely moving despite the wind. They call him Lot. Long ago, before Sodom became a word people whisper, he was known as the nephew of Abraham, the friend of God's promise. He walked once beside faith, saw miracles with his own eyes, and still he chose this valley. Back then it was green, generous, fertile, a paradise of crops and trade routes. Lot came here seeking peace and found profit. He built a home, raised his daughters, married into comfort. But as the city changed, he changed with it. Just enough to survive, not enough to belong. Now he watches the darkness as a man who knows both sides of it. He does not smile. Come inside, he says, not loudly, but with a certainty that leaves no room for refusal. You turn, and then you see them. 2 figures, walking slowly up the street. They look like travellers' dust on their robes, quiet steps, eyes that notice everything and judge nothing. Yet something in their movement unsettles you. The air bends slightly around them, as if the world itself is giving them space to pass. Even the dogs do not bark. Their faces are calm, but not ordinary calm. It's the kind that comes from power disguised as peace. They reach the door, and Lot bows. He doesn't just greet them, he lowers himself completely, forehead nearly touching the ground. In a city where men only bow to gold or pleasure, this gesture feels alien, sacred. And there came 2 angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom, and Lot seeing them rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. Genesis 19:1. Turn in, I pray you, Lot says, his voice trembling slightly. Spend the night under my roof, wash your feet, rest your heads. Tomorrow you can rise early and continue your journey. The 2 men exchange a glance. For a moment, their silence feels eternal. Then one of them nods. We will abide in the street all night, he says. Lot's eyes widen. No, he whispers quickly. You cannot. His tone changes, pleading, urgent. He steps forward, lowering his voice. You do not know what happens here after dark. You do. You've seen enough. The streets behind you still pulse faintly with laughter, but it's not joy, it's hunger waiting for a scent. Lot insists. He reaches out, gripping one of the travellers by the sleeve. Please, my lords, come inside. He pressed upon them greatly, and they turned in unto him, and entered into his house, and he made them a feast, and did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. Genesis 19:3. Inside, the light changes everything. The lamp's glow paints the walls gold. The floor is swept clean. A loaf of unleavened bread rests on a low table beside a bowl of water for washing feet. It's not luxury, it's peace. And after the noise of Sodom, peace feels like a miracle. Lot's wife moves quietly, her face half hidden by a veil. Her hands are swift, practiced in hospitality, but her eyes flicker toward the window again and again. She knows this house is a small island in an ocean that doesn't forgive islands. You sit in the corner. The bread tastes simple, honest grain. Salt, nothing else. The guests eat in silence, but their silence feels alive, like a prayer that doesn't need words. Lot studies them. He knows they are not ordinary. Their stillness is too deep, their eyes too knowing. Something divine breathes through their composure. But he doesn't ask. Some truths are recognized, not spoken. Outside, thunder murmurs. A second later, there's another sound, softer, closer. A knock. Not one knock. Many. A rhythm. A demand. Lot freezes. His wife's hands stop mid-motion. The guests look toward the door unmoved. Then comes the voice, harsh, amused, too loud for this hour. Lot, bring them out! Another voice joins, then another. Feet scuffing against the street, laughter curling into cruelty. You hear it spread like a wave of rot moving through fruit. Soon the whole alley is alive with shouting. Lot rises. His hands tremble, but his voice stays even. Do not do this wicked thing, he calls through the door. They are under my roof. They are guests. A rock hits the wall, then another. Someone spits, someone laughs, someone chants a word you don't want to understand. Lot turns to the guests. Please, stay behind me. His wife grabs his arm, whispering, You can't stop them. But he steps closer to the door anyway. You feel your own breath shorten. The noise outside grows monstrous voices colliding into one fevered demand. They want the strangers. They want to humiliate, to dominate, to destroy. You realize this is what sin looks like when it stops pretending to be pleasure. Lot opens the door only a crack. Rain spits through, carried by the shouts. The faces outside are wild, eyes gleaming like torches, mouths open in the shape of hunger. You've seen animals corner prey. They look merciful compared to this. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. Genesis 19:4. Lot lifts his hands. I beg you, brethren, do not so wickedly. A hand reaches through the gap, clawing for him. Another. Someone grabs his cloak. The door jolts against the frame. The shouting becomes a single voice made of 100 throats. Then light. Not from a lamp, not from lightning. It bursts from inside the house, white and soundless. The air splits like cloth torn by invisible hands. The men outside scream. You hear them stumble, curse, collide with walls. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. Genesis 19:11. Lot stands motionless. One of the strangers lowers his hand slowly. The light fades, leaving only the trembling of dust in its wake. Outside, the noise dissolves into chaos-confused voices, frantic footsteps, the sound of blindness trying to find its way home. Then silence. The guests turn to Lot. Their calm has weight now, an authority that fills the room like air after a storm. Do you have any here besides yourself? One asked quietly. Son-in-law, sons, daughters, and whatsoever you have in the city, bring them out of this place. Lot swallows hard. Why? What will happen? The second answers, because the outcry against this city has reached the heavens. The Lord has sent us to destroy it. The words hang in the air. You expect thunder, or a cry, or disbelief. But there is only stillness. Lot's wife grips the edge of the table. The daughters press together, eyes wide, uncomprehending. Lot lowers his head. He doesn't argue. He has lived long enough here to know when grace has run out. The lamps flicker. Outside, the sky stirs deep, red, uneasy. The city keeps laughing in the distance, unaware that it has already been weighed and found wanting. Lot steps toward the door. He looks back once, his face caught between grief and duty. The man who once chose Sodom for its beauty now prepares to flee from its ashes. You stand by the window. In the distance, torches move like fireflies, small, bright, blind. The rain stops. The silence thickens. Somewhere above, a wind begins to rise, not from the east or west, but from eternity. And you understand, the city's night is almost over, but its morning will never come. You walk beside Lot as though your steps are tied together by a single invisible thread, and that thread tightens with every turn through the narrow streets where wind no longer moves freely. It circles, remembering the city by scent, lifting the warm dust and the residue of oil and wine. The smells that in the morning had meant comfort now feel altered, darker, like honey left too close to flame. The walls lean inward as if listening. Windows crack open, releasing voices that blend into the low hum of a place too restless to sleep. From far behind, laughter rises and then falls, a ripple fading into the kind of silence that expects thunder. Lot moves ahead with a pace that looks determined but feels fragile, as if conviction itself is fighting exhaustion. His cloak clings to him, his daughters cling tighter. His wife walks just behind, her hands trembling as though they know something her heart has not yet accepted. The two travellers walk in front, their outlines unshaken even by the wind that begins to stir around them. Their calm cuts through the street like a melody you don't fully understand but can't stop following. Even the torches hanging from doorways seem to bow as they pass, bending their flames away from that quiet authority. It's strange how the city looks beautiful now, stripped of noise, silvered by the rising moon. The stone glimmers like bone, the air hums with that fragile stillness before rain, and yet everything feels close to breaking. You feel it in your chest, the weight of something about to begin and end at once. Lot slows, his eyes darting toward the upper hill. His voice is low when he speaks, as if afraid the city itself might overhear. We must hurry. The time is short. No one asks what time he means. Everyone feels it. Behind you, a door opens, then another. The sound spreads like the crack of dry wood catching fire. People emerge from shadows, first a few, then dozens. They gather, drawn not by curiosity but by instinct, like moths rushing toward a spark that promises warmth but offers only ash. Their faces are lit from below by torches, and the light makes them look both young and ancient, youth hollowed by pleasure, age sharpened by envy. They begin to murmur, and the murmurs twist into laughter. "Lot," someone calls. "Why hide your guests? You know the law of the city. All who enter must be known." Another adds, "Share them with us. Let the night see their faces." The crowd thickens. The smell of sweat and smoke blends with wine and perfume. It's a festival gone wrong, a celebration turned confession. Lot raises his hands. "Brothers, I beg you, do not do this wicked thing." His voice trembles, not from fear but from heartbreak. He is pleading not with strangers but with neighbours, men whose children played with his daughters, whose wives once traded bread with his own. But Sodom no longer knows the difference between neighbour and prey. Someone hurls a stone. It misses, clattering off the wall, scattering sparks from a torch. The sound feels too loud for the space, as if the air itself flinches. Another man laughs. Not a happy laugh, but the cruel kind that comes from people who have forgotten how to blush. You look at Lot and realise this is what faith looks like when it's cornered. Not a shout, not a sermon, but a man standing in front of a door he refuses to let evil cross. The crowd surges forward. Hands reach out. Shadows stretch across the walls like claws. Someone grabs Lot's cloak, pulling him forward. He stumbles, catches himself, still pleading, still standing. Then something changes. The two travellers step forward, and the air folds around them like fabric caught in wind. They do not raise their voices, they do not lift their hands high, but light, pure, clean, and soundless, spills out from them, and it's as though the night itself inhales in shock. The light doesn't burn, it reveals. Faces once twisted in rage look suddenly hollow, eyes blinded not by brightness but by truth. The torches flicker and go dark one after another, until the only illumination left comes from within that small doorway. Lot blinks, shielding his eyes. The crowd stumbles backward, groping, crying out, their voices clashing in confusion. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. Genesis 19:11. The sound fades into the heavy hush of defeat. The men grope in circles, hands against walls, shouting, cursing, calling for torches that no longer answer. Inside the house, the light softens. The travellers, no longer pretending to be travellers, turn to Lot. Their calm is the calm of the sea after a storm, the kind that feels both peaceful and terrible because of what it means. One of them speaks, and though his tone is gentle, every syllable lands like a command. "Do you have anyone else in this city? Sons, daughters, sons-in-law? Bring them out. Gather them quickly." Lot stares at him, his lips trembling. "Why? What has happened?" The other answers, and though his voice is soft, the air around him grows heavy. "Because the outcry of this city has reached the Lord. The ground itself has cried out against it, and we are sent to end what mercy has already delayed." Silence. It isn't the silence of peace, it's the silence of realization, the kind that falls when excuses finally run out. Lot's wife covers her mouth. One of the daughters begins to cry. The other holds her hand tightly, eyes wide, whispering questions too small for this moment. Will it hurt? Will it burn the sky? Lot doesn't answer. He looks around the room, at the walls he built, the table he carved, the place that once smelled of bread and laughter. And in his face you see it, the moment a man finally admits that comfort was never worth the cost. Outside, the wind shifts. It carries a sound now, not the chant of a crowd, not the murmur of a city, but the trembling of the earth itself. Something beneath your feet begins to move, like a heartbeat growing faster. The angels exchange a glance. One takes Lot's arm. Now, he says simply, leave. Lot hesitates for a breath, just one. Then he gathers his daughters, his wife, and steps toward the door. The lamp's flame bends toward him as he passes, stretching like a farewell. You follow. The door opens again, and the air outside is no longer the same. It tastes of metal and rain and endings. Above, the sky looks swollen. Clouds layered like molten stone, red at the edges, ready to spill something that is not water. The city below still sparkles faintly, as if unaware that beauty can glow even in the moment before destruction. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom, and upon Gomorrah brimstone, and fire from the Lord out of heaven. Genesis 19:24. You begin to walk, and behind you the world begins to unmake itself. The ground trembles, the air turns thick. Somewhere someone screams a name that vanishes before it reaches your ears. Fire descends not as rage but as truth, the kind of truth that consumes everything that can't survive honesty. Lot's wife falters. She turns her head, just slightly, her eyes seeking the shimmer of what she once called home. For a heartbeat, you see both worlds reflected in her gaze, the fire of heaven and the glow of the city, and then she is still. No movement, no cry, no breath, just silence and the soft hiss of wind moving past salt. Lot doesn't turn. He can't. His hand tightens around his daughters. His steps quicken and the mountain road rises before him, like a promise that costs everything. Behind you the valley burns, not fast, not loud, but steadily, like justice reclaiming time. The river becomes a mirror of fire. The streets crumble one after another. And still the flames rise, not as punishment, but as proof that what pretended to be eternal never was. You keep walking. The night stretches thinner, trembling at its edges. The first light of dawn stains the horizon with a grey so pale it almost feels merciful. Lot slows at last. His breath is ragged, his body bent, but his eyes remain open. He doesn't look back. None of you do. For a long while, no one speaks. The wind quiets. The hills ahead seem empty, waiting. You realize that everything behind you, the sound, the lights, the laughter, the sin, is gone, swallowed by the silence of completion. And in that silence, for the first time, you feel something that isn't fear. It's awe, not the awe of fire, but of grace. That even after all this, the sky still holds room for morning. You keep walking because there is nothing else to do. The road tilts upward in a long, patient curve, and the night lays its cooling hand across your shoulders, as if it would quiet the tremor still running through your bones. And the ground beneath your sandals feels different now. Not the slick stone that remembered laughter, not the crowded dust that remembered music, but the older earth that remembers only footsteps and weather, and the weight of those who must leave quickly without choosing what to take. The air changes too, losing the heavy sweetness of wine and oil and smoke, trading it for a thinner breath that tastes of ash and rain and the edge of morning, and every breath you draw seems to cleanse something you did not know was dirty, a small mercy arriving with each inhalation, a letting go with each exhale. Lot walks ahead with the stubborn rhythm of a man who has used up all his words and must spend only footsteps now. His daughters lean toward him as if more balance could be borrowed from his grief. And his wife. No, do not think her name, the memory will harden if you touch it, is not with you, and the space where she should be is a silence that keeps pace, a third shadow that lengthens and shortens and will not be named. Behind you, the valley pulses with a light, not meant for celebration, the kind of light that does not flicker or charm or flatter, the kind that tells truth without apology, and you do not turn to measure it because the command not to look back is no longer a rule, but an instinct, the body refusing its own self-betrayal. The path threads upward between shoulders of rock that glimmer faintly where dew has settled on their dust, and the stars above are dulled by the red breath rising from the plain, and your mind, which had been nothing but animal, flee, step, breathe, begins to lift its head and look around, and with that looking comes the ache, the questions forming like bruises under thought. What does a city become when it spends its tenderness on mirrors and its courage on masks? What does a soul become when it learns to survive by forgetting itself? How long can a feast go on before the table is set for judgment? And as you think it, you hear again the quiet, terrible instruction that began the leaving and governs every step. Escape for your life. Do not look behind you. Do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountain, lest you be consumed. And it is not merely a warning about geography, not simply a map with safe routes and red X's. It is a command about memory and longing, and the violence we do to ourselves when we feed the hunger that hates us. The wind gathers on the ridge and slides down to meet you, carrying the odour of heated stone and the distant hiss of something burning that is not wood, and when you crest the low saddle you see the plain more fully, an opened palm lit from underneath, and there is smoke, not like the delicate blue that curls from lamps, not like the silver thread from a morning brazier, but a columning heaviness that rises and folds and rises again, the smoke of the land going up as the smoke of a furnace, as the old record says, and for a brief frightening moment you are not here but in that record's margins, looking from far away with a patriarch who rises early to wrestle with the sight. And Abraham gat up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah. And lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. You do not know this man, and yet you know the posture of his heart. Intercession turned into witness. Love turned into ache. The prayer that asked for 10 righteous now watching a fire that answered the arithmetic of heaven. The angels do not hurry, and because they do not hurry, you do not panic. You discover that authority can soothe in the very act of severing, that mercy can be severe in the very act of sparing, and when they pause at a bend where a low fig tree clings to a crack of soil, when they look east and north, measuring arcs of land with a tension that feels like justice counting to the end of a sentence, you understand that what is happening behind you is not rage but repair, not divine temper but divine truth. The plumb line dropped through a city that would not stand straight, the wall taken down because it would not hold up souls any longer. The sky bleeds from iron to ember to a bruised violet that admits the idea of day without yet signing it into law. You think of water and the way it tasted when it was only water, not wine's echo, not perfume's rival, and the thought makes your mouth remember thirst in an honest way. You think of bread and the way it tasted tonight in Lot's house, unleavened, nothing added to flatter the tongue, and you feel a hunger that is not for more but for enough. And in that modest ache the words he spoke, pleading with the messengers earlier in the night, return with the soft authority of something you now agree with wholeheartedly. Oh, let me escape thither, is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. Little, safe, almost nothing, and yet life. How strange, you think, that salvation sometimes arrives in the size we least admire. The path empties into a broader shelf of land, a ledge from which the small city crouched at the edge of the plain becomes visible. Zoar, the little one, the spared one, its gate like a mouth that does not know whether to open or to cry. And it comes to you like a remembered sentence that the angels had said with a patience that carried both warning and concession. See, I have accepted you concerning this thing. I will not overthrow the city for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou be come thither. It is a severe kindness, the halting of catastrophe for the sake of one man's small path, and as you descend the last slope toward the stony road that leads to those low walls, the sun, not caring for human time and yet ordered by it, lifts its first clean blade over the rim of the world, and the text steps alongside the light and nods. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Inside the gate the air changes again, not the perfumed saturation of Sodom, not the high, thin breath of the ridge, but a hesitant, earthy quiet, the sound of a town that has learned to speak softly to avoid being noticed by the larger hungers of the plain. The gatekeepers look at you with that mixture of fear and curiosity that all survivors share, and one of them, a man whose beard is white only at the edges, and whose eyes have the tired courtesy of one who has stood too many nights on too many walls, asks no questions, only gestures toward a public well with a hand that trembles slightly. The first cup of water is colder than you expect and tastes of stone and clay in relief, and it is as if your mouth had waited years to remember that truth can be simple and still be sweet. Lot does not sit. He cannot. His body has become a prayer that requires motion to be spoken, and after the barest shelter is offered in the corner of a courtyard, after bread is set down because it is what one does for those who enter alive, after the daughters lean against each other the way young trees lean together to make one taller thing, he looks at the angels not with questions now, but with a full acceptance that empties him of excuses, and you see in his face the long path from choice to consequence to mercy, the green valley chosen for its ease, the years paid for with 1,000 tiny compromises, the night purchased back with a single obedience, and you do not know whether to call him foolish or faithful, and you realize that names might not help when a soul stands naked in the middle of both. In Zoar, morning feels shy, the sun moves across stone like a cautious visitor, and the people step around you with the carefulness of those who cannot yet admit relief, lest it offend the watcher in the sky. Rumours, which in Sodom were a kind of entertainment, here are only murmurs with calloused hands, and when they spread they do so like winter light, thin, reluctant, undecorated. There is talk of smoke seen from the rooftops, of a river that glowed at midnight, of wind that changed direction without asking permission, and some old woman crosses herself in a gesture that doesn't yet have a name in this place, and no one laughs. You sleep, but it is not the sleep of forgetting. It is the sleep of a body that lays down its weapons after a long siege, and when you wake, the sun has climbed to a simple height, and the angels have not gone, and Lot is standing in the shade of the inner wall, with his face turned toward the hills again, as if the little city, gift that it is still too near the place where desire can be purchased, as if even spared towns cast shadows long enough to find the hearts of those who have newly learned to be careful. He speaks quietly, to no one and to God and to himself at once. We will go up, we will go further away. We will learn silence where it cannot be sold. You go with them, not back into danger, not forward into ambition, but upward into the country where the map grows empty and the names grow fewer. The path is steeper here, carved by water that no longer runs and feet that no longer hurry. Small lizards flash like spilled coins into cracks, and the light plays its old game of making every scrub tree a profit for 5 seconds, and then withdrawing the mantle, and the city below, little and spared and yet still a city, shrinks until it is only an idea, and those are easier to refuse than markets. And somewhere in this climbing, the air cools enough to let you think in long sentences again, and those long sentences begin to weave together into understanding, and understanding does what understanding always does when it is honest. It hurts, and it heals in the same breath. The cave is not much, a mouth in the rock, a curve of shadow that fits two bodies, and then, with patience and rearrangement, four. But it is clean in the way that bare things are clean, and it asks nothing from you but your presence, and it gives nothing to you but shelter, and that exchange, so simple it sounds like poverty to those who like their mercy perfumed, turns out to be enough. Outside, a small shelf of level earth holds the possibility of a fire, and there are twigs and thorny sticks and a drift of last year's dry grass, and the daughters gather them without being told, and when the first flame catches it looks shy, as if the world had frightened it with too much spectacle, and it must rebuild its courage in a quiet place. Lot sits at the cave's lip and does not speak for a long time. The angels stand where the light and the shade braid together, and their faces are unreadable the way mountain tops are unreadable, not because they are indifferent, but because they are too full. The valley beyond Zoar lies under a haze you know is not weather, and somewhere many miles away a column still rises from a place that had sold laughter by the ladle, and now sells nothing to anyone ever again. And into that open quiet the scripture that has been walking alongside your thoughts all morning steps forward and puts its hand on the scene like a father on a child's head. And Lot went up out of Zoar, and dwelt in the mountain, and his two daughters with him, for he feared to dwell in Zoar, and he dwelt in a cave. The words do not ask your opinion about fear. They name it and then watch what it becomes when it is obeyed. Not panic, not flight, but a wise retreat, a leaving that is not defeat, but finally a kind of worship. Hours pass, countable only by the tilt of shadow and the small work of survival, drawing water from a seam in the rock where winter hides a secret, measuring grain from a pouch that lasted the journey, breaking bread carefully so that breaking becomes a liturgy of gratitude. There is no market here, no price shouted, no mask offered, no applause available, and because there is none, you feel the self return to its right size, not the bigness demanded by vanity, nor the flatness demanded by shame, but the exact measure that can receive a day without needing to devour a day. And in that rightness, quiet arrives not as absence but as presence, not as a lack of events but as the event you were always too busy to notice. Lot speaks at last, and when he does his voice is thick with the work of carrying a house through a fire and arriving with only names. I thought peace was where the fields were green, and the city was loud, and the table was long, he says, not to you and not to the messengers, and not even to the girls who are pretending to sleep with their eyes open, but peace is where obedience is, and obedience is wherever the Lord points and says, now. There is nothing eloquent about it, and that is why it is beautiful. It is a sentence as plain as unleavened bread and as nourishing. As light settles into the long gold that precedes evening, you step away from the cave and stand at the edge of the ledge, where the cliff drops in a single honest line, and you let your eyes travel across distances your feet will never cover, and you realize again that the promise in the old hook was not a joke, not an exaggeration to steal attention. You would not last a day in that city, not because the heat was unbearable or the food unsafe or the crowd too loud, though all of that was true enough, but because a soul that breathes the air of self-worship begins to drown long before the lungs protest. The city offered feasts that ate the guests and songs that unsang the singers and nights that ended morning, and even if the body might have dragged itself from dusk to dusk, the person within it would have thinned into a shadow asking mirrors to confirm its existence. Survival without God is simply a slower form of burning. From the ridge to your right, a faint line of travellers appears and disappears, moving like dark stitches across a pale cloth. The world is not empty, only larger than your small grief, and this comforts you without excusing anything. You think of Abraham again, standing early on some high place, eyes narrowed against the distance, heart stretched across the miles to a nephew who had chosen comfort and received consequence and yet was remembered. Not because he deserved remembering, but because promises make God stubborn. And before you can dress this thought in theology, it stands there trembling in its own simplicity. Judgment is real. Mercy is stubborn. Obedience is life. Toward night, the wind returns with the clean edge it had abandoned in the valley. It moves through the sparse grass with a sound like pages turning, and you sit nearer the fire, and the daughters lean into one another, speaking in the quiet language of those who have lost a home together, not asking why the world burned, they saw enough to know why, but wondering what shape the world might take now, and whether mornings will always feel this thin and this holy. Lot listens, nodding more than answering, and the angels who have said their necessary words offer only presence which turns out to be the truest comfort available when answers would be an insult. When darkness settles fully, it does not feel like threat. It feels like a cloak that the mountain shares, an invitation to rest without negotiation. The last sentence of the day writes itself not in your mind, but in the way your body unclenches, in the way your jaw forgets to hold back the ache, in the way your hands, empty of purchases and performances, learn again how to be hands. And if a prayer drifts to the edge of your tongue, it does not hurry to announce itself. It does not ask to be heard by anyone but the one who kept you from turning into your longing. It arranges itself in a few quiet words that consent to wait for their appointed hour. Far below, the plain is dark now, the furnace cooled to a memory that will outlive anyone's telling. Zoar glows as a few dim points that could be insects or stars depending on how you choose to name them. The cave behind you breathes a small warmth into the night, and the ledge holds your weight as if the earth itself were agreeing with your decision to be smaller than your appetites. And somewhere above the ridge, a single star stubbornly pierces a streak of cloud, not flashy, not loud, not a comet with a message for empires, just a point of light that says still, still, still. Sleep does not take you captive. It receives you. You do not fall into it so much as arrive, and as you arrive you understand that the story will not end in flight or fire, but in a kind of learning that cannot be taught by teachers or markets. It is the learning of the spared, the knowledge that life after mercy must be chosen on purpose, repeatedly, quietly, in caves and on ledges and in little towns whose names do not sell songs. And with that understanding settling like a second blanket, you let the last of the valley's heat leave your bones, and the mountain's cool enter, and you close your eyes with gratitude that does not need to raise its voice. Dawn will come again, not the cruel dawn that mocks with light, not the indifferent dawn that lifts regardless, but the gentle one that arrives where obedience has prepared a place to sit, and when it does, this ridge will look different, not because the rocks will have moved, but because you will have. And the words that hovered over the leaving will no longer feel like fear, but like freedom, and the city that taught you how quickly a day can kill a soul will fade to the size of a lesson that can be carried without poisoning the hands that carry it. For now, the mountain holds you. For now, the cave keeps its promise. For now, the quiet is not empty, but occupied by a presence that has followed fire with favour. And when the first pale line of morning draws itself across the sky, thin, honest, unadvertised, you will rise, not to look back, but to listen, because before the prayer is spoken aloud at the end of this long telling, there comes a hush that belongs to it, a seam between night and day so smooth that crossing it feels like continuing the same breath. You wake into a morning that does not rush to explain itself, a pale ribbon of light laid across the lip of the mountain, as if the sky, after all its burning, had chosen gentleness as the only honest way to return. The cave behind you breathes a quiet warmth like a faithful animal that kept watch through the dark hours, the small circle of ash where last night's flame surrendered, still holding the memory of orange, and the air, thin, cool, and almost sweet, carries neither perfume nor smoke now, only the clean scent of stone that has been rinsed by weather and truth. Lot sits at the threshold with his elbows on his knees, not slumped in defeat but folded inward the way a man folds around a pain that healing has already begun to touch. His daughters sleep close to each other with the defenceless calm that follows terror too large for words. Their faces turn toward the light without calculation, as if even in dreams the body knows it must learn a new habit of hope. And down below, where maps used to write the names of two cities with the careless confidence of permanence, the valley lies still and colourless, a bowl of ash with a thin breath of steam drifting like the last sentence of a book that has finally said everything it was capable of saying. You do not hurry to stand. You let your weight settle into the shelf of stone and feel how the mountain holds without complaint, the way strong arms hold a child who has wept until even weeping is tired. And only then do you rise and step to the edge where the world opens, not wide with ambition, not loud with markets, but wide with silence, with the honesty that arrives when noise has burned away, and you find yourself remembering the long thread that has brought you here, Egypt's heat and hunger and work done for the glory of someone else's name, the desert's lean mercy and water that sometimes sprang from rock as if memory itself had cracked, the mountain where fire talked but did not consume, where law was carved into stone because stubborn hearts could not hold shape without lines, and the city that called indulgence wisdom until the foundations, left unattended, announced the truth with flame. It comes to you slowly at first, and then all at once that none of these places, for all their distance, have stood apart in meaning. Egypt taught the body how to ache, the wilderness taught the will how to listen, Sinai taught the mind how to name, Sodom teaches the heart how to die when it kneels to itself, and across them all, like a patient river bending around rock and through canyon, there runs the stubborn faithfulness of God, not early and not late, but perfectly timed, arriving at the precise moment when endurance would otherwise become decay. You think of Abraham rising early to look toward the plain, and see what prayer could not prevent but love refused to abandon, the scripture's phrasing almost audible in the morning wind, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. You think of Moses stepping into the impossible split of sea with a staff that had learned obedience first as wood and only then as sign, and of Israel walking between walls of water while the ground under their feet learned the word dry again. And you think of Lot, not righteous by brilliance nor clean by isolation, but spared by obedience in the single hour when obedience mattered more than explanation, and a truth unfolds that is too simple to be fashionable and too solid to be denied. Without God, you would not last a day, not in chains, not in freedom, not in the marketplace that sells names, not in the cave that shelters souls. Without him, the body becomes a tool, the mind becomes a mirror, the heart becomes an appetite, and a day, however abundant, eats the person who tries to swallow it. The sun takes another cautious step up the slope of the sky, and the world shows edges again, the seam where rock meets scrub, the faint trail that switchbacks toward a little town spared for a little faith, the silhouette of a bird cutting a clean line above the ledge, as if to prove that movement can be honest, and with those edges comes the reweaving of your own interior. Thoughts lengthen into sentences that do not apologize for their weight. Memory loosens its grip on what it cannot recover and tightens its hold on what it must never release. And the soul, which has spent so much time bargaining with noise, discovers quiet to be not emptiness but presence, the kind you do not command and therefore can finally trust. Lot stands, not quickly, not theatrically, but with the measured care of one who knows his bones are carrying more than a body. He scans the ridge as if he could read tomorrow on stone, as if the mountain kept a ledger where future days are recorded in the angle of light. His daughters gather small stones and stack them without instruction into the beginnings of a hearth or an altar or both. Children often know that the difference lies not in shape but in use, and you see, in that simple stacking, the first gesture of rebuilding that does not try to imitate what was lost, a new grammar in which enough is considered fluent. There is a way to tell a story that flatters the teller, a way that writes heroes out of smoke and carves villains from the same material with the knife of hindsight. But the scripture refuses to do this because mercy refuses to do this. Abraham bargains and fears. Moses listens and fails and listens again. Lot chooses comfort and then chooses obedience when comfort has nothing left to offer. Israel forgets, remembers, forgets, and is remembered. And in every case, the centre of the narrative is not the brilliance of the human character, but the persistence of a God who will be found, a God who follows the cry of the oppressed into brick pits, and follows the whisper of a single guest into a city without shame. A God who answers idols with silence and answers prayer with fire that knows the difference between consuming and cleansing. A God whose judgment is not the tantrum of power, but the repair of reality, whose rescue is not the exemption of favourites, but the invitation of all who will say yes when the door is opened, and the voice says, "Leave now." You lay your palm on the rock and feel the day warming it from the surface inward, and your own thoughts warm in the same pattern, unfreezing truths you had kept at arm's length because they required you to move. That Sodom is not a museum exhibit sealed safely in antiquity, but a climate of the heart that can grow wherever attention is priced higher than love, wherever appetite is allowed to rename itself freedom, and shame is renamed oppression, and hospitality is taken hostage by entertainment. That Egypt is not only a chapter in a history scroll, but a habit that returns whenever profit persuades a person to forget the image of God in the face that labours for them. That the wilderness is not merely geography, but the grace that follows us after leaving. The narrow road where God rewrites the vocabulary of desire, so that manna can be received without complaint, and water from the rock can be believed without spectacle. You breathe in, slow and useful, and the breath goes farther than lungs. It clears a space where gratitude can build without permission from mood, and into that space you let the old words walk in their own steady sandals, not to decorate the morning, but to hold it. The sun was risen upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. The timing matters, judgment still hot, mercy already moving, consequence not cancelled, future not denied, smallness chosen over spectacle because smallness shelters what spectacle sells. You whisper the phrase almost without noticing, and your voice feels less like speech than like a tool the morning has borrowed, to remind itself that stories do not end in smoke as long as God remains himself. From the ledge you can see the road that bends toward the spared town, and on that road a little procession of ordinary life is beginning again. A donkey's patient head, nodding as if to bless the ground, a woman with a jar whose balance speaks of years practiced in the quiet arithmetic of households, a child carrying 3 figs with the seriousness of a messenger, a man who pauses to look toward the valley and then chooses to keep walking. No one sings, but the silence is not hostile, and you realize that this small parade of enough, is the most defiant hymn a morning can offer after a night like that. You think of the viewers who fell asleep to the sound of these sentences, who set their phones on the table and let the room go dark and trusted a stranger's voice to carry them back through centuries for reasons they could not fully name. You think of the ones who came for history but stayed for a hush they had not known how to find, and of the ones who click on boring because everything else has made them too tired to be thrilled. And you bless them without saying so, because blessing, when it is real, respects the privacy of the soul it visits. You think of them because you know that Sodom still sells tickets under different neon, Egypt still hires under different contracts, the wilderness still waits just beyond the noise with the same supply of honesty and sky, and the God who walked this ridge before you were imagined still prefers to be found by people who have run out of speeches and are ready to learn the long grammar of yes. Lot's shadow tilts, lengthens, breaks against the cave's mouth. He has the look of a man who will never again confuse luxury with safety, who will measure places by whether they teach his daughters to be kind rather than by whether they flatter his name. He steps back to the little stack of stones and, with the awkward grace of someone who is learning a new language mid-sentence, sets his palms on the top rock as if dedicating it without liturgy. There are no trumpets, no tears that anyone can see, only the deep consent that houses are truly built of choices long before they are built of walls. You walk a little farther along the ledge where the mountain drops away in a clean sheet, and you let your eyes linger on distances that would take days to cross, not because you intend to cross them, but because the soul sometimes needs to practice largeness after it has wisely chosen smallness, and in that looking you frame a resolve that does not need a banner, to keep telling these old stories in a voice quiet enough that the listener can hear their own breathing between the lines, to keep naming mercy as the last word when judgment has done its necessary work, to keep reminding yourself that the hook was never a trick. You wouldn't last a day here, but a door, and to keep opening that door gently until the light on the other side learns the name of the person who steps through. The scripture moves again at the edge of your hearing, not to argue with experience, but to braid it, a simple, stubborn braid that will hold when the wind tries its hand. Remember Lot's wife. Not to shame, to spare, not to freeze you in fear, to keep you from freezing in longing, to remind you that the human heart, when it is asked to face the future without the crutches of yesterday's lies, tends to reach backward for one last taste, and that obedience, which seems hard until the hour of choosing, becomes the easiest thing in the world the moment your feet agree with your faith. You sit down and let the rock take the full story of your weight. You close your eyes, not to leave the morning, but to enter more deeply into its uncluttered grammar. And there, where the breath slows and the tongue learns again how to be honest, you let the prayer you have been carrying for 6 chapters lift its head, not as performance, not as exit music, but as the natural consequence of witnessing a God who refuses to give up on people who have given up on themselves. You do not rush it. You do not decorate it. You simply stand it on its feet and let it walk toward the one who has been walking toward you all along. The prayer after the fire, 1-2 minutes, slow voice, gentle cadence. God of the morning after, you were present in the noise we chose, and in the quiet you chose for us. You found us in the heat of Egypt and the hunger of the desert, in the doorway of a house that defended mercy, and in the valley that taught us what false joy costs. You were patient when our hearts loved mirrors more than truth, when our mouths were full of songs that did not bless, when our hands built altars to our appetites and called them freedom. We confess that without you we would not last a day, not in chains, not in a feast, not in the softness of our own beds. We confess that we have looked back when you said go, that we have bargained when you offered grace, that we have called comfort peace and busyness purpose. Have mercy on us, not because we have learned the right words, but because you never forgot our names. Teach us to build small and honest, to love steady and near, to choose obedience over explanation when the hour is late. Give us houses where doors open to strangers and close to harm, tables where bread is enough and gratitude is the spice, where our cities are Sodom in new colours, Let your kindness lead us to repentance before the fire ever falls. Where our days are Egypt under different managers, break the yoke and heal the backs that bend. Where our wilderness frightens us, give us manna for today and the courage not to hoard tomorrow. Bless the one who listens now, tired, anxious, half asleep, with the peace that does not ask for proof. Let their room become a small mountain, their breath a thin, clean wind, their heart a door that learns the grammar of yes. And when they wake tomorrow, let it be into a future that does not need spectacle to be holy, a future where your mercy is the last word and the first light, where love outlives the fire, and where we, remembering Lot's wife, choose to face forward together. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.